In many of my videos, I say, don't agree with me, prove me wrong. And today I'm going through some comments from people who don't agree with me. And we will see if they actually manage to do that. I picked the comments from my video, Free Palestine No Thanks, because that one got the most response. I'll try to choose the more challenging comments. Let's begin. When Balfour Declaration was announced in 1917, the Jews were less than 5% of the population, and the Arabs were around 90% in Palestine, modern-day Israel-Palestine. Today, the percentage of Jews is around 50. Get your facts straight. This is called ethnic cleansing. Let's start with a small correction. In 1917, Jews weren't 5%, but closer to 12%. Christians were around the same number, and Muslims about 75%. Over the following decades, many Jews immigrated to the land of Israel. I've never claimed otherwise in any of my videos. And this isn't ethnic cleansing. In those years, before and after World War I, millions of people moved around for economic, political, and national reasons. All the Jews who immigrated settled on land they purchased. I've said this before. If you think I'm wrong, name one Jewish community that was built on land stolen from the Arabs in 1910, 20, or 1930. Let's skip the big dramatic words like genocide or ethnic cleansing. Just give me one concrete example and we will go from there. In 1947, the Arabs started a war to destroy the Jewish community. They lost. Some Arabs fled out of fear. Others fled because Arab leaders said that anyone who stayed in the Jewish area would be considered a traitor. And yes, some were expelled. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what this Arab says about Deir Yassin, the example that pro-Palestinians use more than any other.
I asked Dr. Khalidi how we should cover the story. He said, we must make the most of this. So he wrote a press release stating that at Deir Yassin, children were murdered, pregnant women were raped, all sorts of atrocities.
Arab radio stations passed on the false reports, ignoring the protests of the witnesses.
We said there was no rape. He said we have to say this, so the Arab armies will come to liberate Palestine from the Jews.
This was our biggest mistake. We did not realize how our people would react. As soon as they heard that women had been raped at Deir Yassin, Palestinians fled in terror. They ran away from all our villages.
By the way, Arabs who didn't flee stayed and became citizens of Israel. 60,000 Arab stayed, and today there are over 2 million Arab citizens of Israel. That's not exactly ethnic cleansing. How many Jews survived in area conquered by the Arabs? 0. So if anyone committed ethnic cleansing, it was the Arab side. And the reason so few Jews are now in Arab countries is because they willfully migrated to Israel in most cases. Regarding the Jews who left Arab countries, let me give you a tip before I go into details. If 99% of a community leaves, it's not because they wanted to. It's because they feared for their lives. In Yemen, Egypt, Morocco, Iraq, and Syria. I've already made 2 videos about the persecution of Jews in Arab countries, and another general one on the topic. The links are in the description. Next. Israel was founded by 3 terrorist groups, Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi. Why aren't you mentioned that? So, first of all, no, the State of Israel was founded by David Ben-Gurion on May 14, 1948. The Haganah, the Irgun, I will just clarify for my Israeli viewers, the Irgun is the English name for Etzel, Irgun Tzvi Leumi, and the Lehi were paramilitary organizations. But the largest and most important Jewish military organization was the Haganah, which literally means defense. It was founded in 1920 after Arabs murdered dozens of Jews and the British failed to protect them. That's when Jews realized they needed to protect themselves, and so the Haganah was born. In 1929, there were more Arab attacks. They wiped out the Jewish community in Gaza, Hebron, and other places. Dozens of Jews were murdered. After that, a group broke off from the Haganah and formed the Irgun, which was more militant and proactive. And yes, the Irgun also carried out attacks that killed Arab civilians. In 1940, the Lehi was founded. It fought the British, who were a foreign occupier and who blocked Jewish immigration. I could make a whole hour-long video just about these groups, but we have more comments to cover. So here are just two quick points and a personal note. The Arab attack in 1920, the one where they began murdering Jews, started during a religious Muslim holiday, Nebi Musa. Muslims returned from the grave of Moses shouting, "Massacre the Jews, the government is with us." And then they murdered Jews in the Jewish quarter. This connection between religious holidays and violence, that's something you don't see among Jews or Christians. You don't find Jews walking out of a synagogue on Passover shouting, "Let's kill the infidels." And you won't see Christians coming out of a Easter Mass calling for pogroms in Muslim quarters. But among Muslims, there is a clear link between religious celebrations and violence. Second point, back then, the Arabs in their land didn't even want an independent Palestinian state. They wanted to be part of Syria. Historically, there was never a Palestinian people, and the Arabs here wanted to join Syria. Interesting how no one mentions that today. Another thing no one talks about, there was a lot of tension between the Jewish groups, and even violence, even murder. There were cases where Jews killed other Jews for political reasons. The Irgun executed Jews they suspected of collaborating with the British. And the Haganah fired on the Altalena, a ship that the Irgun bought. In total, if you count all Jews killed by other Jews between 1920 and 1948, a very turbulent 30-year period, the number is around 30 people. You know how many Arabs were killed by other Arabs for political reasons in the same period? Many thousands. But when Arabs killed Arabs, no one cares, not even the Arabs themselves. Not today and not 80 years ago. That brings me to a personal note. I remember when 20 years ago, on my first trip to Europe, I was surprised, even impressed, that anti-Israel activists know so much about Israeli history. They talked to me about the Irgun and the Lehi, and I thought, whoa, how do they know this stuff? So many young Israelis today don't even know what those organizations were. The Irgun and Lehi were small. At their peak, only about 6,000 people combined. They operated for a short period and disbanded 80 years ago. Then I realized something important. It is not that anti-Israel people actually know history. They are just desperately searching for a way to portray Arabs as the sole victims. So they dig up a few isolated cases of Jews attacking Arabs and blow them out of proportion. And how do I prove this in a debate? I ask the anti-Israel crowd, can you name any Arab armed group from the same time period? None of them can. Can you name the leading Arab figure in mandatory Palestine? None of them know that his name was Amin el-Husseini, and that he, like other Arab leaders, Hassan Salameh, Kawakji, were in Nazi Germany calling for Muslims to murder Jews across the Muslim world. They don't know that. The Haganah, the Irgun, and the Lehi were the first Jewish groups to fight against Islamic violence. For centuries, Muslims were used to humiliating Jews, killing Jews, and suddenly Jews are defending themselves. And a lot of people are still in shock over that. What do you say about the mass killing and removal of Arabs living in cities such as Haifa in 1948? I've heard this a few times, so here's a little tip for all the anti-Israel folks out there. Don't use Haifa as your example. Haifa is actually the best proof of everything that went wrong on the Arab side. In Haifa, it was the Arabs who started the fighting. They opened fire on Jewish vehicles. When the Jews responded, the very first thing that happened was this: the Arab elite fled. Haifa was one of the centers of Arab high society, and right at the beginning of the fighting, their leaders fled to Lebanon and Syria. This had a huge impact on Arab morale. Then the Arab military commanders also fled. Some of the Arab fighters in Haifa weren't local, and different Arab militants began looting and robbing each other. When it became clear that the Jews were going to win, the Jewish leadership offered peace. They told the Arabs, "Lay down your arms and stay." The Jewish mayor even made a public call, "Don't leave." But the Arabs chose to leave. This is all documented, by the way, because the British were still in Haifa. It was their main port. So the Battle of Haifa is the perfect miniature version of why the Arab failed. They started by attacking Jewish civilians. Their leaders ran away. Their commanders ran away. Arab gangs looted and fought each other. And when Jews offered them the chance to stay in peace, they chose to flee. And you have the audacity to say that it is Muslim countries who have been ethnic cleansing Jews for years. As an Israeli, you have been brainwashed by your own media and people. I'm sorry for you. The numbers speak for themselves. The Jewish population in Arab countries has dropped by 99-100% in the last 80 years. That's ethnic cleansing. And don't feel sorry for me. I'm doing just fine. Thanks. So much misinformation, so much manipulation. Big words. Next time, bring examples. First of all, Israel is not a democracy. It's a fascist, autocratic ethno-state. Go fly a Palestinian flag in Israel and tell me how it goes for you. English isn't my first language, but I don't think writing "not" in all caps makes you right. Israel is a democracy. I can say here that I'm against the government. I'm against Bibi. And it is true. And nothing will happen to me. I won't be arrested. My family won't lose their jobs. My kids won't get kicked out of university. I can say I don't believe in God, that I think Judaism, like all religions, is dumb, and still nothing will happen to me. Try saying that in a Muslim or communist country and see what happens. And yes, you can wave a Palestinian flag in Israel. Many people won't like that. We are in the middle of a war. But I imagine that if you waved an Argentinian flag in London during the Falkland War, people wouldn't love that either. But it wouldn't mean the UK wasn't a democracy in the 1980s. You are welcome to visit Israel and ask Israeli Arabs if they would prefer to live in Israel or in Arab country. They will tell you they prefer to stay here. Weird that people want to stay in a fascist autocratic state, right? Second, it is not cleansing if the Jews just move to their new country. It is cleansing if they are forcibly removed from their land, as the Jews have done to the Palestinians since 1948. I already answered this, but just to add, since you wrote since 1948. From 1948 to 1967, the West Bank and Gaza were under Jordanian and Egyptian rule. That's 19 years in which the Arabs had full control. Why didn't they establish a Palestinian state then? I will tell you why. Because the goal of the Arab world was never to create a Palestinian state. It was to destroy the Jewish one. If they had really wanted a state, they could have had one in 1937, 47, 48 till 67, 94, 2000, or 2008. But every time they said no. Because a Palestinian state was never the goal. The destruction of Israel was. I wanted to hear your argument, but you are just too full of apples. Your apple juice was too dense to be tolerable. Not to mention your premises is morally objectively wrong, because there is no justification for genocide. I've never justified genocide. Don't put words in my mouth just because you can't handle the facts I bring. Thank you. I stopped watching after 2 minutes. The 1947 plan was based on the UN providing 52 of the land to Israel, when in fact Israelis at that stage had only bought circa 7% of the land. Before we talk about percentages, let's start with the most important thing. Arab leaders never said, we accept a Jewish state on 20% or on 3%. They never talked about percentage at all. They said one thing: we want to destroy the Jewish community. All this talk about land percentage came after the war, and even that is misleading. Yes, you are right that Jews had owned about 7% of the land, and the UN gave them 52%. First of all, if Jews owned 7%, does that mean Arabs own 93%? No. The Arabs owned about 20%. The rest was British mandate land. Second, the British had already given around 70% of the mandate land to create Jordan. So most of the land had already been given to the Arabs. And the land the Jews were offered, mostly desert. The Arabs got all the fertile areas. The Jews got the coastal swamps, the malaria zones, and the Negev desert. But the Jews drank the swamps, made the desert bloom, and turned it into farmland. Meanwhile, many Arab lands became polluted and unproductive. That's the truth, even if it's hard to accept. So yeah, of course the Arab League was not happy, especially after the Nakba. Here you're confusing cause and effect. The Arabs said no, they started a war, and because they lost the war, they brought destruction on themselves. You talk about history, but you fail to mention that the creation of Israel meant 750,000 Palestinians were kicked off the land, and many massacred. No, if the Arab had said yes to the two-state solution, not a single Arab would have had to leave their home. There was nothing in the UN partition plan that said Arab had to move or evacuate. I've said this many times, and I'm happy to say it again. If you start a war and you lose, you're not the victim. I know it's mind-blowing. Oh, and the whole Palestine didn't exist. Apple Juice doesn't even deserve a comment. A simple Google search will reveal your ignorance and malicious nature. Please go ahead, do a Google search and find one quote from any Arab leader in 1948 saying, "We are the Palestinian people." Any group has the right to define its identity. No issue there. But you can't invent history. Shall I continue with our next comment? Before the state of Israel existed, Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived side by side in the Middle East. This is one of my favorite lies. No minority ever truly lived well under Islam. Let me destroy this argument quickly. In the 30 years before Israel was founded, there were 3 genocides against Christians in the Middle East: the Armenian genocide, the Assyrian genocide, the Greek genocide. That doesn't sound like peaceful coexistence to me. The UNRWA was supposed to be a temporary program, which had to be renewed every 3 years and has consistently been extended since 1949. It employs mostly Palestinian refugees and a small number of international staff. The necessity for such an organization should tell you enough about the ongoing problem with Palestinian refugees, as the UNRWA is funded by donations, runs by volunteers, and would not exist if it wasn't absolutely necessary. No, UNRWA is not funded by donations. It's a UN agency, paid for by member states, and it pays salaries to Palestinians. But more importantly, you didn't answer the actual question. Why does the UN have 2 separate refugee agencies? One for the world's refugees and another just for the Palestinians. What makes Palestinians more privileged than any other refugee group on earth? Why do they get their own special agency? And here is something even more interesting. All the world's refugees from Syria, from Sudan, from Ukraine, they stop being considered refugees once they settle somewhere and build a life. But Palestinians stay refugees forever. Their status is inherited through generations. No one else gets that. We have it right. You didn't answer that. I do not think you distinguish between Muslims and extremists or radicals. Otherwise, it is an okay video. Thank you. I don't think I confuse Muslims with radicals. But when you talk about these kinds of topics, some levels of generalization is unavoidable. I never say all Muslims are. And here is my example. If I say men are more violent than women, do I mean all men are violent? Do I mean no woman is ever violent? Do I hate men? No, no, and no. But if around 95% of the world's prison population is male, then yes, we can say men are more violent than women, and that doesn't make me a sexist or a man hater. So let me ask you something. If you were dropped into this world as a lesbian, would you prefer to land in a country with a cross on its flag or a crescent? But it is not just about being a lesbian. If you were born as someone who challenges religion or criticizes the government, would you rather land in a Christian country or a Muslim country? Now, I want to touch on a bigger principle that a lot of people miss. The anti Israel camp try to narrow the discussion. They repeat the same specific examples. Irgun Lehi Dir Yassin, King David Hotel, Nakba Gaza, and I have no problem discussing those examples. I did it in this video and in other videos. But the Israeli side, and I include myself, tries to expand the discussion. We talk about the Middle East as a whole, Islamic society, Muslim countries around the world. If you told me the Middle East is peaceful, only Israel has problems with its neighbors, I might say, okay, maybe Israel is the issue. But if Lebanon just had a brutal civil war, Syria had murdered 500,000 people, Yemen is collapsing, and the rest of the surrounding countries are Islamic dictatorship, then clearly there is a bigger problem. If you told me, yes, Iran kills gay people, but the rest of the Muslim world is tolerant, I would say, okay. But if like 17 out of the 20 worst countries to be gay are Muslim, then we've got a pattern. If you told me Muslims have a small issue with the Jews, but they are fine with other minorities, I would say maybe the Jews are the problem. But if millions of Christians have been murdered, persecuted, or live in fear in Muslim countries, the problem isn't the Jews or the Christians. If you told me the Middle Eastern heat makes people a bit crazy, but in Europe, Muslim communities are peaceful, I would say, okay. But if every European country, Sweden, Belgium, the Netherlands, Wisconsin, France, Italy, and the UK, the Muslim community is much more violent than others, then the problem isn't the Jews. And that leads me to my final comment for this video. Your YouTube thumbnail says Free Palestine, no thanks, here is why. So I was interested to hear what kind of solution you would have. But you only talk about the historic claim and how Jewish people were treated unfairly in the past. What's the solution? Keeping Palestinians in their small open-air prison at the mercy of the Israeli army to come one day and destroy their homes and kill their children for opposing? Why not let them have their own sovereignty? First of all, like I said, it was the Arabs who said no to Jewish sovereignty. That is the root of the problem. And the Israeli army is not like Arab armies. We don't intentionally target children. But let's talk about solutions. Peace in the Middle East will come only when Muslim society changes, when they accept Jewish sovereignty over a tiny country, when they become less violent towards minorities and towards each other. Then, and only then, there will be peace. My upcoming videos will be about the children in Gaza, the images you are not being shown in the news, and about the fake propaganda industry coming out of Gaza. A lot of the photos you are seeing on the news and on social media, they are simply fake, and I will prove it. So subscribe to the channel. I want to thank all my supporters. Thanks to you, I can pay my editor and upload a lot more content. So thank you. See you soon. Yalla bye.